When it comes to home decor, once you have the basic essential functional things, sometimes it can be hard to know where to go from there. And especially in today's economy, I'm trying to think of the things that are the highest impact with the lowest budget. So these are my top 10 home hacks that will give you the biggest bang for your buck. And now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know that hacks is necessarily the most accurate word, because some of these are not hacks. Some of these are mindsets, some of these are things to restructure your entire life, some of these are products, some of these are just very specific things to do, but these are definitely my go-tos when I need to make the highest impact on the lowest budget. Now, that doesn't mean that these will be easy, quite the opposite in fact. Some of these take a lot of energy and a lot of elbow grease, but if you're in the same boat I'm in, these tips will make a massive difference. If you're new here, my name is Medora. I use they, them pronouns, and I make videos about home design for girls, gays, and theys. So without further ado, let's get into my top 10 low budget, high impact home hacks. And yes, I'm saving the best for last because that's how I get you to watch the whole video or something. I don't know. Number 1 is to paint the ceiling, a door, or all of the trim in the room, including crown molding, baseboards, window trim, door trim, etc. Again, like I said, these are not necessarily low effort because painting a door and painting trim and painting ceilings are all harder than painting regular walls, but they do take a lot less paint, which is the main cost when you are painting. If you're painting anything where you need a brush for small detail work, I'm going to link my favorite brush below. It's the Worcester brand and it looks like this. And it specifically has a silicone handle rather than a solid wood or plastic handle, which makes it so much more comfortable for painting. I painted an entire 7-bedroom apartment with a normal paintbrush and rollers, obviously. And my hand would cramp up so bad that I had to stop after an hour of painting with a paintbrush. But this current apartment that I'm in, I used the Worcester brush and I could paint for a solid 3 hours without my hand cramping up. If you haven't used it yet, please go buy it. It will change your life. I'm really not trying to be dramatic, but sometimes the tools you work with make all the difference, and this is one of those. Number 2 is to condition your wood. Whether that's putting a cutting board oil on your cutting boards, or using something like the Howard Feed and Wax wood polish and conditioner, both of those will be linked below, but you can really use anything that will keep the wood hydrated. I'm sure you could even make your own, there's probably recipes all over Pinterest, but whichever one you use, it'll really just help bring some extra life back into your furniture. Number 3 is the least hack of a hack I can get, but I feel like it tends to be kind of forgotten about when it comes to interior design content here on YouTube, and that is to declutter, organize, and clean. This is the boring part of home design that no one talks about, but like, it doesn't matter how good your space looks if there's too much stuff everywhere. It doesn't matter how good your space looks if you don't have homes for things. It doesn't matter how your space looks if there's toothpaste in the sink. You could take the exact same apartment with the exact same furniture, and if one of them is cluttered, disorganized, and gross, it's gonna feel like a completely different apartment from one that is clean and tidy and organized and isn't overflowing with stuff. I know this is the one that no one wants to hear, but like, this will make the biggest difference. Trust me, I am not perfect at this either. Just outside the frame of this camera, there is stuff everywhere, and it's a work in progress. That's all I'm gonna say. This one's probably common sense for most of us, but number 4 is going to thrift stores, antique stores, and vintage stores, or any small locally owned business over big box stores. I especially love this, not just for decor and like big pieces of furniture, but also for small, useful, practical, everyday things. I've gotten a handful of kitchen things, especially from antique stores, namely a copper saucepan and a copper pot, but then also a funnel, a potato masher, plates. I feel like kitchen things in particular are much easier to thrift and source secondhand because they're usually made out of hard materials that are meant to be cleaned. Whereas with fabrics, you want to be a little bit more discerning about what your comfort level is in terms of sourcing secondhand fabrics. A lot of times, like Etsy and eBay will be pretty safe, but if you find something from Goodwill, you definitely want to pop that into the freezer for a day or two before you bring it into your home, just in case there's bed bugs. And when you are going to thrift stores and antique stores and vintage stores, this segues perfectly into number 5, which is to use discernment to know if you actually need the pretty thing for everyday life in your home, or if you can just appreciate the pretty thing without bringing it into your life. This all comes down to knowing very specifically what you are looking for, and maybe more importantly, what you are not looking for. There is a certain extent to which you have to have kind of an open mind when it comes to thrifting and antiquing, because it kind of really just all depends on what's out there at the stores when you go to them. But if you're trying to bring a certain element into a space, for example, if you already have way too much wood in a space and you're trying to bring in a new element, don't buy a wood trash can if you're actually looking for a metal one. I have spent far too much time and energy and money on pretty things just because I thought they were pretty, and I was like, ooh, that's pretty, therefore I like it, therefore I must buy it. Those things are not connected. If something genuinely like speaks to your soul and you just like have to have it and you're so drawn to it. I get that. That's different. But I've personally found it really helpful to be able to see something in a store, be like, wow, that's really pretty. That would be great in someone's home. I don't need more dishes, or I don't need another pillow cover. Right? Because if you don't have this discernment, this is how you end up with a bunch of extra clutter, and you'll need to go back to number 3 to declutter. Number 6 is especially great for a thrifted, more eclectic aesthetic, and it'll be cheaper because you don't have to specifically make sure things are matching. But number 6 is using different colors of woods, different types of woods, different stains, and in general, just mixing your woods. That being said, the caveat is that they all have to have the same undertones. The most common undertones you'll find, especially in thrift stores and antique stores and vintage stores, are red and yellow. And if you can't tell between the two, the undertone is probably orange, which is just the neutral version of that. If you mix red undertones with yellow undertones, with sometimes you'll even find like a blue or purple undertone, that is not going to look good. That is going to feel very disjointed and all over the place and not cohesive at all. But as long as you have some light toned wood and some dark toned wood and some medium toned wood that all have the same undertones, you'll be great. Number 7 is all about rugs. High quality wool rugs can get really expensive, and even the mid quality wool rugs are still expensive. But if you can thrift one at a more affordable price point, they'll basically last you forever as long as you take care of them. So the cost per use is actually much lower than a cheap polyester rug that'll fall apart in a year. And again, if we're thinking about impact here, for me, impact is not just visual impact in terms of how a space looks, but it's also impact in terms of how a space feels. How do you feel when you are existing in the space? Again, this is another thing that I feel like has really been lost through talking about interior design via social media, because we're all so focused on the befores and the afters and having a big transformation, and that is not what interior design is. It's fun, it makes for entertaining content, but that is not what interior design is. Interior design is making a home work for you on your budget in a way that makes sense for you and your life and your hobbies and what you're trying to accomplish. And I think a wool rug is just a perfect example of that, because you feel the difference when you're standing on a wool rug versus a cheap polyester rug. They are not the same. A wool rug is so much more pleasant. And whatever you can do to try to bring more high quality things into your life like that, the better you will be for it. It can definitely be hard to find exactly what you're looking for in a rug, especially when you're thrifting it, but just make sure to turn on your Craigslist notifications and search alerts and be looking around as much as possible. I somehow ended up finding a 9x12 wool rug for free on Craigslist, and I definitely got really lucky that it doesn't have an ugly pattern on it, but it is a mint green color, which is unfortunately the only color of green I don't like. So I've come up with the fabulous idea of trying to dye this rug. This is probably a mistake. This rug is already incredibly heavy when it's not wet. But if you want to see me struggle, subscribe. Number 8 is swapping out outdated light fixtures. Now, I'm not saying to swap out just like a normal boob light with whatever this modern abomination is, but definitely check out my boob light replacement video, because there are a ton of great suggestions in there at all different price points, but you can usually find something that's like at least slightly less ugly than what you currently have, or something that's DIY-able from a thrift store or Habitat for Humanity restore or something like that. I promise you do not need an electrician to do this. You can do it yourself. I know it can be scary. I know it can be intimidating, but this is so doable. As long as you have like a stepladder or a chair so that you can reach the light fixture, and possibly a second person depending on how big the light fixture is, I promise you can do this yourself. You basically just match up the colors of the wires, white to white, black to black, green or copper to green or copper, and that's basically it. All you have to do is remember to turn off the breaker first. That's the most important part of this whole thing. Otherwise, you really can't fuck it up. And also, once you find some boob light replacements that you actually really love, you can take these with you from apartment to apartment, and it'll make such a big difference everywhere you go. If swapping out a hardwired light fixture feels too overwhelming for right now, at the very least, bring in more mood lighting, bring in table lamps and plug in wall sconces, and make sure to swap out existing light bulbs for warm colored light bulbs. Because having cozy, warm lighting, especially in the evening, will absolutely make or break how you feel in a space. Oh, and dimmers. Always do a dimmer if you can. I know it's not always possible, but if you can, it's a really nice touch. Number 9 is to frame your art well, so that it really gives each piece its moment to shine. Generally, what that'll look like is to get frames that are much bigger than your piece of art, and just use tape, ideally archival tape, to tape it onto a big piece of paper that fits inside the frame, instead of bothering with a mat. Don't get me wrong, mats are beautiful when you can see up close the little bevel on the edge on the inside. But like, you can realistically get the same effect from just a piece of paper behind it. And mats are so expensive. I see so many huge frames at thrift stores that, you know, some of them aren't the cutest, but maybe there's a DIY that you could do to them. Maybe there's some way that you could like zhuzh it up a little bit. Maybe there's a way that you could like play with the existing color scheme of the frame and use a fun colored paper as the mat, and maybe it'll make sense in a specific context. Or you could even just like make your own frame out of some wood molding. Again, the sky's the limit here. You can really play around with colors and wood stains and different papers, maybe even use some leftover wallpaper, and just like have fun with it. As long as your frame is significantly bigger than the piece of art, instead of like just barely big enough for the piece of art, it'll look 10 times better. Last but not least is number 10, which again, I saved the best for last. Not necessarily because it's a good home hack, because this definitely takes a lot of time and energy and work. But number 10 is to cultivate an emotionally stable home full of love and care and respect and trust, both within yourself and also with any others that live there with you. Whether that's family, a partner or partners, roommates, animals, plants, etc. And on the flip side of this, if you're not currently living in a home full of love and care and respect and trust, and if it's not something that people are willing to work on, do everything you can to get out of there. I've been there before, and you just need to get out of that situation. You deserve the amount of love and care and respect and trust that would make a younger version of you cry tears of happiness. And if your home isn't giving that to you right now, I promise there's a home out there that will give that to you. As always, if you want to support this channel, head over to patreon.com/medorakia, and if you want to work with me one-on-one, go to medorakia.com. Bye.